Welcome, fellow history adventurers. There's something timeless about gathering together in the quiet hours to explore the mysteries of our past, don't you think? Wherever you are in the world right now, whether you're winding down after a long day or already tucked in for the night, we'd love to know what corner of the globe you're joining us from and what hour marks the beginning of your journey into rest. Feel free to share in the comments below. It's always wonderful to feel connected across time zones through stories that have endured for millennia. And tonight, we're stepping into one of those stories that feels almost too grand, too vivid to be pure imagination, the legend of the Labyrinth. Close your eyes for a moment and picture it a sprawling, bewildering maze carved deep beneath the earth, a place where every turn could lead to wonder or peril. At its heart awaits the Minotaur, a creature of myth and nightmare, while above, in the sunlit world, a king's ambition and a hero's courage set the stage for a tale that has echoed through ages. This isn't just a story, it's an experience, a journey into the shadows of human fear and the light of ingenuity. For thousands of years, this legend has captivated dreamers and scholars alike, inviting us to ask, where does myth end and history begin? Could the labyrinth have been more than a fable? Was there a real stone-carved maze waiting to be discovered, a place that inspired such awe and dread that it became woven into the very fabric of ancient storytelling? As we venture together into these twisting corridors of mystery, we'll uncover not just the layers of the legend itself, but the deeper human truths it reveals about bravery, fear, and our unending desire to make sense of the unknown. So settle in, grab your flashlights and your courage, and let's begin. The heart of this tale begins with a king, a curse, and a prison unlike any other. King Minos of Crete, a powerful ruler who commanded the seas, prayed to the god Poseidon for a sign of favor. In answer, a magnificent white bull surged from the waves, a symbol of divine blessing. But when Minos, consumed by greed, broke his vow to sacrifice the beautiful creature back to the god, he invoked a terrible wrath. In a twist of cruel divine punishment, Poseidon cursed Minos' queen, Pasiphae, with an unnatural and overwhelming desire for the very same bull. The only one who could devise a way to fulfill the queen's desperate wish was the brilliant and exiled inventor Daedalus. He constructed a hollow, lifelike cow, a decoy so convincing that Pasiphae was able to hide within it and ultimately unite with the bull. From this unnatural union was born the Minotaur, a being with the powerful body of a man and the head and tail of a bull. This was no simple monster, it was a living, breathing symbol of the king's shame, a permanent reminder of his arrogance and the catastrophic consequences of defying the gods. King Minos, desperate to hide this evidence of his family's disgrace and the monstrous result, once again turned to Daedalus. His command was to build a prison so complex, so utterly inescapable, that the Minotaur could be contained forever, hidden away from the world and from the accusing eyes of his subjects. And so Daedalus conceived the labyrinth. This was no ordinary maze. Ancient sources describe it as a bewildering, multi-leveled chaos of winding corridors, dead ends, and twisting passages that doubled back on themselves. It was a masterpiece of architectural deception, designed to confuse and trap anyone who entered. The very walls themselves seemed to shift, making it impossible for the mind to hold a map or find a way back. The Minotaur was placed at its very center, a beast in a cage of stone from which there was no exit. But a hidden monster is not a solved problem. The Minotaur, a creature of immense strength and ferocity, required a terrible tribute. It is said that after Minos' son, Androgeos, was killed by Athenians, the grief-stricken and vengeful king imposed a gruesome penalty on the city-state of Athens. Every 9 years, 7 of their bravest young men and 7 of their most graceful maidens were to be sent as tribute to Crete. They were not sent as guests or prisoners of war. They were sent as offerings, forced into the darkness of the labyrinth, left to wander the endless halls until they inevitably encountered the ravenous Minotaur waiting in the shadows. This cycle of horror continued for years, a dark age for Athens, until a young prince named Theseus, the son of the Athenian king Aegean, could bear it no longer. He volunteered to be one of the 7 youths, vowing to his fearful father that he would slay the monster and put an end to the bloody tradition forever. To truly understand the world that birthed this legend, we need to look more closely at its central architect, both literally and figuratively. King Minos stands as a colossal figure, a bridge between the divine and the mortal. As the son of the god Zeus and the princess Europa, his very origin story is steeped in the supernatural, granting him an air of destined authority. In the tales, he is the powerful ruler of Crete, a just lawgiver who, after his death, became a judge of the dead in the underworld. Yet, this same king is also portrayed as capable of immense pride and cruel vengeance, as we saw with the punishment of Athens. This duality makes him a fascinating character, part enlightened monarch, part tragic figure brought low by his own hubris. But the name Minos itself might hold a key to a deeper historical truth. Many scholars propose that Minos was not merely the name of one individual king, but rather a title, much like Pharaoh in Egypt or Caesar in Rome. It could have been a hereditary name borne by a succession of rulers on Crete, each one a Minos. This theory helps explain how the legendary king could be involved in stories that seem to span generations. It connects the myth to the very real and powerful Minoan civilization, a Bronze Age society that dominated the Aegean Sea with its formidable navy, known in legend as the thalassocracy of Minos. The grandeur of their palace complexes, with their sprawling, multi-level layouts and intricate networks of rooms, could easily have been the architectural inspiration for the mythical Labyrinth itself. The myth of a mighty King Minos, then, might be a folk memory of the peak of Minoan power and influence. And then we have the genius behind the maze, the man who made the unimaginable a reality, Daedalus. His name literally translates to cunning worker or skillfully wrought, a perfect description of history's first great engineer and artist. He wasn't just a builder, he was a visionary inventor, credited in various myths with creating everything from the woodworking glue used in shipbuilding to the concept of the sail. His most famous commission, of course, was the Labyrinth, a structure so complex that its very design was a form of dark magic. It was his ultimate masterpiece of deceptive architecture, a prison designed to be a perpetual mental and physical trap. Yet, in a profound twist of irony, the creator became the victim of his own creation. Fearing that Daedalus might reveal the secrets of the labyrinth or simply to ensure his silence forever, King Minos imprisoned the brilliant inventor and his young son, Icarus, within the very maze he had built. For the man who designed its every confusing turn, it was not an inescapable prison, but it was a gilded cage. This confinement set the stage for one of the most famous and cautionary tales of all time, Daedalus's escape by crafting wings fashioned from feathers and wax for himself and his son. He famously warned Icarus not to fly too close to the sun, lest the heat melt the wax, nor too close to the sea, lest the moisture weigh down the feathers. It's a story that speaks to the double-edged sword of human ingenuity. It can build a labyrinth and devise a way to soar above it, but it cannot always protect us from our own folly. The tragedy of Icarus's fall is forever tied to the genius of his father, a man whose creations brought both salvation and ruin. Yet even a monster has a name, and in some of the oldest tellings, the Minotaur was known as Asterion. This name, meaning starry one, offers a haunting and deeply human contradiction. It evokes not a beast of pure darkness, but something connected to the heavens, a being with a destiny written in the stars. This poetic name suggests a complexity often stripped from the creature in later tellings. It wasn't merely a mindless monster to be slain, but a tragic figure from its first breath, a living consequence of the actions and broken promises of the gods and mortals around it. Its origin is one of the most unsettling in all of mythology, rooted in divine punishment and transgression. King Minos, eager to solidify his right to the throne of Crete, prayed to Poseidon, god of the sea, for a sign of his favor. In answer to his prayer, a stunningly beautiful white bull surged from the waves, a powerful symbol of the god's endorsement. This created a sacred pact. The bull was a gift, but one Minos was expected to sacrifice back to the god, an act that would honor Poseidon and complete the ritual. But when Minos saw the magnificent creature, he was seized by greed and arrogance. He decided such a perfect specimen was too valuable to give up, so he substituted a lesser bull from his own herds, believing the god would not notice or that he, a king, was above such obligations. Poseidon, as one would expect, noticed, and the punishment he devised was not a simple bolt of lightning or a shipwreck. It was a far more subtle and cruel form of vengeance, one that would bring lasting shame to the entire royal house of Crete. He inflicted upon Minos' wife, Queen Pasiphae, an overwhelming and unnatural passion for the very same white bull. This was a desire so powerful it consumed her, a divine madness that left her in torment. The only person who could possibly devise a way to satiate the queen's desperate longing was the brilliant, exiled inventor Daedalus. He constructed a hollow wooden cow, a decoy so lifelike and convincing that it could deceive the animal. Covered in a real cow's hide, the construction allowed Pasiphae to hide inside and ultimately fulfill her cursed desire. From this unnatural union, the Minotaur was born. It was a being of two natures, forever at war with itself, the powerful body of a man and the head and tail of a bull. It could not speak, only bellow. It could not reason, only react with primal instinct. King Minos was horrified. This creature was not just a monster, it was a walking, breathing monument to his own deceit. It was the undeniable evidence of his wife's shame and a permanent reminder that his arrogance had invited the wrath of the gods directly into his own home. The Minotaur, named Asterion but feared as a beast, was therefore a symbol far more terrifying than any simple predator. It represented the catastrophic fallout of broken oaths, of pride that challenges the divine, and of the unnatural blurring of boundaries between man, beast, and god. It was a problem of the king's own making, and its confinement within the inescapable labyrinth was his desperate attempt to hide his greatest failure from the world. And so we come to the hero who dared to challenge the darkness. Back in Athens, the cycle of sorrow continued as the time for the third gruesome tribute to Crete approached. The city was shrouded in grief, preparing to send 14 of its finest young people to an almost certain and horrifying end. It was into this atmosphere of despair that Prince Theseus, the young son of King Aegean, stepped forward. He could not stand by while his city suffered, and he made a solemn vow to his fearful father. He would volunteer as one of the tributes, and he would not only enter the labyrinth but slay the Minotaur, breaking Crete's terrible hold over Athens forever. The king, desperate yet hopeful, made his son promise that if he succeeded, he would change the black sails of mourning on his ship to white sails on his return journey, a signal of his triumphant survival. Upon arriving in Crete, the Athenian youths were paraded before King Minos and his court. It was there that the king's own daughter, the Princess Ariadne, laid eyes on Theseus. She saw not just another victim, but a figure of resolve and noble bearing, and she was instantly captivated. Her heart went out to him, and she resolved that she could not let him meet the same grim fate as the tributes before him. In secret, she approached Theseus and offered him a way to survive the impossible. She would provide him with the means to conquer the labyrinth, but he had to swear to take her away with him when he left Crete, freeing her from her father's oppressive court. Her ingenious solution was a simple ball of thread, the legendary clue, from which we get our modern word clue. Her plan, likely devised with the help of the labyrinth's creator, Daedalus himself, was brilliantly straightforward. Theseus was to tie one end of the thread to the entrance of the maze. As he ventured deeper into the confusing, shadowy corridors, he would slowly unwind the ball, leaving a literal lifeline behind him. After he accomplished his grim task, he could simply follow the thread back through the twisting paths, reversing his journey and finding his way to freedom. Armed with this simple tool and his own courage, Theseus entered the labyrinth. We can only imagine the oppressive silence, the chilling echoes of his own footsteps, and the palpable dread as he navigated the endless stone passages that all looked the same. Deeper and deeper he went, following the distant, terrifying sounds of the beast until he finally confronted the Minotaur in its lair. In a fierce and brutal struggle, the hero vanquished the monster, ending its reign of terror and the bloody tribute it demanded. True to Ariadne's plan, he then followed the glimmering thread back through the daunting maze, reuniting with the other Athenian youths and awaiting Ariadne. They fled to their ship under cover of night and set sail for Athens, their hearts soaring with the success of their daring escape. But the story does not end with a simple happy ever after. In a perplexing and deeply human twist, their journey was interrupted on the island of Knossos, for reasons lost to time, perhaps a change of heart, a divine command, or sheer exhaustion. Theseus abandoned the sleeping Ariadne on the shore. The princess who had risked everything for him, betraying her own family and homeland, was left utterly alone. This act adds a profound layer of moral complexity to Theseus's heroism. He was a savior to Athens, but a betrayer to the woman who made his victory possible. His failures continued. In his euphoria or his grief, he committed one more catastrophic error. He forgot his father's directive to change the sails from black to white. As his ship approached Athens, the aged King Aegean saw the black sails on the horizon, and believing his son was dead, was overcome with despair and threw himself into the sea that now bears his name, the Aegean. Theseus returned a victorious hero, but his triumph was forever stained with personal tragedy and loss. This compelling story of a hero and a monster begs the question, how much of it might be rooted in actual history? To find the potential truth behind the myth, we need to journey to the island of Crete during the Bronze Age, a time of incredible cultural flourishing. Here, the Minoan civilization reached its peak between 2000 and 1450 before the Common Era, a period that aligns remarkably well with the traditional timelines of the Theseus legend. The Minoans were not a minor local culture. They were a major maritime power, a thalassocracy that dominated trade and influence across the Aegean Sea with a sophisticated fleet. Their society was advanced, peaceful in its lack of fortified cities, and astonishingly artistic, celebrated for its vibrant frescoes, intricate pottery, and beautiful jewelry. At the very center of their architectural and administrative world were the great palace complexes, the most magnificent of which was Knossos. When the British archaeologist Sir Arthur Evans began his extensive excavations there in the early 20th century, what he uncovered was nothing short of a revelation. He didn't find a simple ruin. He uncovered a vast, sprawling network of multi-storied buildings connected by a bewildering maze of narrow corridors, countless small rooms, sharp turns, and long, colonnaded hallways. The layout was so complex, so intentionally confusing, that it was easy to see how ancient visitors from less sophisticated mainland cultures like the Mycenaean Greeks might have perceived it as an incomprehensible labyrinth. For them, this was not a palace, it was a maze. The very name Evans gave to this civilization, Minoan, was drawn directly from the legendary King Minos, linking the myth irrevocably to the place. This connection offers a fascinating reinterpretation of the myth's key elements. The story of Athenian tribute could be a folk memory, a mythological metaphor for a real historical relationship. Archaeological evidence suggests that Minoan Crete exerted significant cultural and perhaps political influence over the mainland, including early Athens. The sending of 7 young men and 7 women every 9 years might not be a literal account of human sacrifice, but a symbolic story representing a different reality. It could reflect a historical practice of Athens sending young people to Crete as tributary slaves, as diplomatic hostages to ensure good behavior, or even as participants in religious ceremonies. Some archaeological finds on Crete, such as suspected human remains with potential ritual significance, have led a few scholars to cautiously speculate about practices that could have been interpreted by outsiders as sacrifice, though this remains a deeply debated and controversial topic. The Minotaur itself might also be more than a monster. Minoan art is filled with powerful bull imagery, from the famous bull-leaping frescoes depicting acrobats vaulting over a charging bull to ritual vessels shaped like bulls' heads. The bull was clearly a central, sacred symbol in their culture. A creature that is half man, half bull could be a mythological representation of a priest or a shaman wearing a ceremonial bull mask during important religious rites. To an outside observer who did not understand the ritual, such a figure moving through the shadowy, confusing corridors of the Knossos palace complex could easily have been remembered and mythologized generations later as a terrifying beast lurking at the heart of a maze. The legend, therefore, becomes a powerful narrative that encapsulates the awe, fear, and perhaps resentment that mainland Greeks felt toward the dominant, sophisticated, and mysterious civilization of Minoan Crete, transforming cultural memory and political history into a timeless tale of heroes and monsters. And so we arrive at the very stones that may have inspired the legend, the sprawling archaeological site that Sir Arthur Evans so passionately identified as the Palace of Minos. When Evans first began his work at Knossos in the year 1900, he wasn't just excavating a ruin. He was uncovering a civilization that had been lost to history for millennia, known only through the faint echoes in Greek myth. What he revealed was a structure of such immense scale and bewildering complexity that it immediately brought the story of the Labyrinth to mind. This was no simple building. It was a vast, multi-leveled complex covering over 20,000 square meters, a veritable city within a city, with an estimated 1,300 rooms connected by a seemingly chaotic network of corridors. Walking through its remains today, even with modern pathways and reconstructed sections, one can easily feel a sense of disorientation. The layout deliberately avoids straight lines and symmetrical planning. Corridors twist and turn abruptly, opening suddenly into large, bright courtyards only to narrow again into dim, winding passages that lead to small, secluded chambers. Staircases crisscross, leading to multiple levels, some up to 5 stories high in parts. There are countless doorways, light wells, and storage magazines lined up in long rows, their identical doors adding to the repetitive, confusing feel. For an ancient visitor from the less architecturally sophisticated mainland, perhaps a Mycenaean Greek or an Athenian, this place would have felt utterly incomprehensible, a purposeful maze designed to awe, confuse, and perhaps even intimidate. It is not difficult to imagine how such an experience, passed down through generations by oral tradition, could have evolved into the myth of an inescapable labyrinth. Evans was utterly convinced that he had found the historical seat of the legendary King Minos. So powerful was this connection in his mind that he named the entire lost civilization Minoan, a term that has stuck ever since and permanently welded the myth to the archaeology. He saw the grandeur of Knossos, its advanced drainage systems, its vibrant frescoes depicting bull leaping and processions, its intricate artistry, as evidence of the powerful and sophisticated culture that could have commanded the seas and demanded tribute from its neighbors. He even reconstructed parts of the palace using concrete, a controversial decision that allows modern visitors to better grasp its original grandeur, but also forever shaped our interpretation of the site. While later archaeologists have debated many of Evans's conclusions and his methods of reconstruction, the fundamental link he forged remains powerful. The Palace of Knossos stands as the most compelling candidate for the physical inspiration behind the labyrinth. It provides a tangible, breathtaking setting for a story that has captivated humanity for centuries, a place where myth and history intertwine so completely that it becomes almost impossible to separate one from the other. Arthur Evans's work at Knossos was nothing short of revolutionary for its time, bringing a lost world into the light, but his methods have sparked vigorous debate that continues to this very day. Driven by a powerful vision to not just dig up ruins but to resurrect them, Evans employed modern materials like reinforced concrete to rebuild crumbling walls, reconstruct entire multi-story staircases, and restore grand features like the now iconic throne room with its graceful griffin frescoes. His goal was to make the ancient site comprehensible and awe-inspiring for visitors, to give them a tangible sense of walking through the very halls of King Minos. In many ways, he succeeded magnificently, standing in the central court today, surrounded by those soaring columns and vibrant recreations. You truly feel the scale and grandeur of the Minoan world in a way that scattered foundations alone could never convey. However, this approach came with a significant cost. By filling in the gaps with concrete, Evans wasn't just preserving, he was interpreting, and his interpretations were deeply influenced by his own desire to link the palace directly to the myth. He confidently labeled certain areas based on his assumptions, naming a room with a stone seat the throne room, and identifying small, dark chambers as lustral basins for purification rituals. These labels, which we still use today, might be correct, but they are ultimately educated guesses. Later archaeologists have pointed out that we have little definitive evidence for how most rooms in the complex were actually used. A room Evans called a queen's bathroom might have been a storage closet. A space identified as a shrine could have been a workshop. His concrete restorations, while helping us visualize, permanently fixed his specific narrative onto the stones, making it difficult for future researchers to separate the original Minoan structure from Evans's early 20th century vision of it. The core of the controversy lies in whether Evans discovered the labyrinth or, in a way, helped to create it anew. His unwavering conviction that this was the palace of Minos and the source of the labyrinth myth led him to shape the site to fit the story. The reconstructions guide the visitor's experience along a path that feels bewildering and maze-like, but some scholars argue the original complex may not have been nearly as confusing in its own time. The Minoans who lived and worked there would have known its layout intimately. The labyrinthine quality might have been exaggerated by the myth and then amplified by Evans's work, which connected disjointed fragments of walls into a cohesive but potentially misleading whole. This doesn't diminish the brilliance of his discovery, but it reminds us that archaeology is never just about uncovering the past. It is also a process of interpreting it, and every interpreter brings their own biases, hopes, and stories to the table. The Knossos we see today is a mesmerizing palimpsest, a layer of ancient Minoan design written over by a layer of modern imagination, forever blurring the line between the historical reality and the legendary tale it inspired. To truly understand what the Minoans believed, we must turn from the grand architecture of their palaces to the intimate details of their art. The vibrant frescoes that adorn the walls of Knossos are not merely decoration. They are a window into a worldview where the sacred and the athletic were beautifully intertwined. The most famous of these, the bull leaping fresco, depicts a breathtaking and incredibly dangerous acrobatic ritual. Young athletes, both male and female, are shown gracefully vaulting over the back of a charging bull in a sequence of movements that required immense skill, courage, and trust. This was far more than a sport or entertainment. It was likely a central religious ceremony, a test of human spirit against raw, untamed natural power, performed to honor the gods and perhaps ensure the fertility and continuity of the community. This profound cultural reverence for the bull offers a powerful new lens through which to view the Minotaur myth. The creature of legend, a hybrid of man and bull, might not be a literal monster but a symbolic representation of this sacred relationship. It could personify the spirit of the bull leaping ritual itself, the dangerous, awe-inspiring, and perhaps even divine union of human agility with animal strength. In this light, the myth transforms from a simple monster-slaying tale into a story about overcoming primal forces, mastering fear, and navigating the complex rituals of a powerful and mysterious culture. The monster at the heart of the maze might represent the ultimate challenge of the bull-leaping ceremony, a test that some Athenians may have failed, with their failure mythologized over centuries into a tale of literal sacrifice. Another crucial clue is found carved into the very stones of the palace, the symbol of the labrys, or the double-headed axe. This was not a common tool of war for the Minoans. It appears repeatedly in religious contexts, etched into pillars and inscribed on seals. It was a potent symbol of authority, likely associated with a powerful goddess figure who presided over the palace. The connection to our legend becomes electrifying when we consider linguistics. The very word labyrinth may derive from labyrinthos, which some scholars argue means the house of the double axe. This redefines our entire understanding of the place. Rather than a confusing maze designed to trap a monster, the original labyrinth might have been the house of the sacred double axe, a place of religious ceremony and royal power within the Knossos complex. The winding corridors could have been processional routes for rituals. Their complexity meant to create a journey of spiritual significance for initiates, not to confuse and trap prisoners. What the later Greeks remembered as a prison of terror may have actually been, for the Minoans, the most sacred and revered space in their entire world. The tale of the labyrinth extends far beyond the shores of Crete, reaching across the Mediterranean to the sands of Egypt, where ancient historians described a structure so vast it challenged comprehension. Greek writers, who often looked to Egypt as a source of ancient wisdom and monumental architecture, spoke of a labyrinth that made even the Great Pyramids seem ordinary. The famed historian Herodotus, who traveled to Egypt in the 5th century before the Common Era, claimed to have seen this marvel himself near a place called Lake Moeris. He described it as a complex surpassing all human works, a building with 12 roofed courts and 3,000 rooms, 1,500 above ground and an equal number below. He wrote that the passages through the chambers and the bewildering walks about the courts were an endless wonder, leaving him certain that no mere mortal could have built such a place without divine inspiration. Centuries later, the geographer Strabo also mentioned this colossal structure, noting its immense size and the great number of its halls connected by winding passages, making it so complicated that a visitor could scarcely find their way in or out without a guide. This Egyptian labyrinth was likely the sprawling mortuary complex attached to the Pyramid of Amenemhat III at Hawara. Unlike the Minoan palace, this was a structure explicitly designed as a labyrinth, not just interpreted as one. It was a massive administrative and religious center, a place of many rooms, corridors, and shrines, built to serve the cult of the deceased pharaoh and to act as a center of power. For a Greek visitor like Herodotus, accustomed to different architectural styles, the sheer scale and intricate, repetitive layout of such a complex would have been utterly staggering. It was a tangible, real-world maze of stone, and stories of it would have circulated through the Greek world for generations, becoming a benchmark for describing any large, confusing building. This connection opens up a fascinating possibility that the Greek myth of the Cretan labyrinth was not born in isolation, but was profoundly influenced by tales of these Egyptian megastructures. Trade and cultural exchange flourished between the Minoans and Egyptians. Artifacts from Crete have been found in Egyptian tombs and vice versa. It is entirely plausible that Minoan or early Mycenaean merchants and diplomats, upon returning from Egypt, brought back stories of these incomprehensibly large temple complexes. Over centuries of retelling, the memory of the real Egyptian labyrinth could have merged with the cultural memory of the complex palace at Knossos and the symbolic importance of the bull, eventually crystallizing into the singular legend of the Minotaur's maze. The story becomes a powerful blend of fact and folklore, where the awe inspired by a foreign civilization's architecture was woven into the fabric of local myth, creating a timeless narrative that drew its power from very real, very ancient wonders of the human world. Indeed, the Labyrinth and the Minotaur are far more than a singular myth from ancient Crete. They are powerful, universal symbols that have echoed across human cultures for thousands of years. This pattern of the winding, confusing path appears in countless forms, from the intricate Celtic stone carvings and turf mazes of medieval Europe to the spiritual path designs of Native American communities. Often, these were not puzzles to be solved for entertainment, but sacred symbols etched into the earth or carved into rock, representing a profound spiritual journey. Walking these paths was a form of meditation, a ritualistic act meant to symbolize the soul's difficult trek through life, its confrontation with challenges, and its ultimate goal of reaching enlightenment or a sacred center before returning to the everyday world, reborn or renewed. This universal motif transforms the specific story of Theseus into something much deeper. The Minotaur, waiting in the darkest heart of the maze, ceases to be just a monster from a foreign land and becomes a representation of the primal fears and inner demons that every person must face. It is the embodiment of the unknown, the chaotic, and the savage forces that lurk both within the human psyche and in the outside world. Its defeat, then, is not merely a physical victory but a profound metaphor for courage, self-mastery, and the triumph of order and reason over instinct and terror. Theseus, armed with his sword and the thread of intellect, becomes an archetype of the hero who ventures into the deepest shadows of uncertainty and, through bravery and cleverness, brings back light and safety to his community. The thread of Ariadne, that simple clue, is itself one of the most enduring symbols. It represents the guiding principle that leads us through life's most perplexing challenges. It is intuition, faith, reason, or love, that one steadfast thing we can hold onto when we are lost in the confusing labyrinths of grief, doubt, or difficult decisions. It is the promise that even in our darkest and most disorienting moments, there is a way forward and a way back to ourselves. This deep, symbolic resonance is the true secret to the legend's immortality. It is a story so fundamentally human that it transcends its specific time and place. Every culture that has ever grappled with fear, sought meaning in struggle, or celebrated the hero who faces the unknown, sees a part of itself reflected in the twisting corridors of the labyrinth and the struggle at its center. The myth endures because it is not just about a king and a monster on a Bronze Age island. It is about us and the endless, universal journey we all undertake to find our way through the complexities of our own lives. But the journey of this ancient myth did not end with the classical world. Its echoes have rippled forward through the centuries, finding new life and meaning in every era. In the 1400s, the Italian poet Dante Alighieri, in his monumental work, The Divine Comedy, placed the Minotaur as a ferocious guardian at the entrance to the seventh circle of hell, the ring reserved for the violent. Here, the beast is no longer confined to a maze of stone, but is instead set as a sentinel in a landscape of eternal punishment, a symbol of savage, bestial rage that must be overcome on the soul's journey toward redemption. Dante masterfully transformed the classical monster into a Christian allegory, demonstrating the myth's incredible flexibility to serve new philosophical and spiritual frameworks. Centuries later, the labyrinth itself became a central character in the literature of the fantastical. The 20th century Argentine writer Jorge Luis Borges was utterly captivated by the idea of the maze, weaving it into many of his short stories as a metaphor for the cosmos, time, and the infinite complexities of the human mind. In works like The House of Asterion, Borges offers a stunning twist. He tells the legend from the Minotaur's own perspective, portraying Asterion not as a monster, but as a lonely, philosophical being trapped in his own endless existence, waiting for a redemptive visitor. This profound shift in viewpoint showcases the myth's depth, allowing it to explore themes of solitude, destiny, and the nature of reality itself. The visual arts have continually reinterpreted these symbols as well. In the 1930s, Pablo Picasso became fascinated with the Minotaur, using it as a potent alter ego in a series of etchings and paintings. In his haunting works, the creature is often depicted in scenes of chaotic revelry, raw passion, and profound suffering. Picasso's Minotaur is a complex figure, sometimes a brutal aggressor, other times a vulnerable, blinded beast representing the artist's own struggles with creativity, desire, and the dark, untamed forces within the human psyche. This modern portrayal highlights the myth's power to convey the dualities of our nature, the constant interplay between the civilized self and the primal instincts that lie beneath. This enduring legacy continues to thrive in our contemporary culture. The Labyrinth is a staple of fantasy films, from the practical effects marvel of Labyrinth to the digital nightmare of the shifting walls in Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. In video games, players don't just observe the maze but actively navigate it, confronting their own minotaurs in the form of boss battles and complex puzzles that test their wit and courage. Even the field of psychology has adopted the symbol. Carl Jung saw the labyrinth as a perfect representation of the individuation process, the difficult and winding journey into the unconscious mind to confront the hidden aspects of the self, the shadow, and achieve wholeness. The fact that a Bronze Age tale can so seamlessly find a home in modern therapy, blockbuster movies, and metaphysical literature is a testament to its fundamental power. It proves that these ancient stories are not relics. They are living, breathing narratives that continue to provide a framework for understanding the most complex maze of all, the human experience. This enduring fascination with the symbol naturally leads us to a tantalizing and persistent question. Could a physical labyrinth, a real stone-carved maze from the age of myths, still be waiting somewhere beneath the soil of Crete or the waves of the Mediterranean? It's a notion that has fueled the imaginations of treasure hunters and adventurers for generations. Some theorists point to a specific location on Crete, the immense network of caves near Gortyn. This is no small cavern. It is a vast, sprawling system of tunnels and chambers that stretches for kilometers, a truly labyrinthine natural formation. Unlike the open, reconstructed halls of Knossos, the Gortyn caves remain dark, largely unexplored, and deeply mysterious, offering a tangible sense of the disorientation described in the ancient tales. Could this natural maze have merged with the memory of the Minoan palace to create the legend? Or might it even be the original site that inspired the entire story? Beyond the island's shores, another possibility emerges from the depths of the sea. We must remember that vast portions of the ancient Minoan coastline have been submerged over the millennia due to geological shifts and rising sea levels. Sophisticated sonar surveys have indeed revealed intriguing, seemingly man-made structures resting silently on the seabed. While most of these are likely the remains of ports or sunken settlements, the dream persists that one might reveal a more complex, purposeful design, an architectural puzzle lost to the waves. This idea taps into a deeper human yearning for a lost world, an Atlantis-like civilization waiting to give up its secrets. Then there are the whispers and legends that have circulated for centuries among locals on Crete, stories of hidden passages and concealed chambers deep beneath the known ruins of the Knossos Palace complex. These tales speak of a second, deeper labyrinth, a truly subterranean world that the official excavations never uncovered. While mainstream archaeologists relying on ground-penetrating radar and careful excavation largely dismiss these accounts as romantic folklore, they are a powerful reminder that only a fraction of the Minoan world has been thoroughly examined. The island is a geological and archaeological puzzle, with countless ruins still unexcavated and caves still uncharted. So, do most scholars believe a literal, monstrous maze is waiting to be found? No, the prevailing academic view is that the labyrinth was the Knossos palace itself, its complexity mythologized over time. Yet the possibility remains that the story preserves a distorted memory of a real, specific type of Minoan structure, perhaps a ritual complex, a vast underground storage facility, or a fortified treasury that was destroyed by an earthquake or deliberately sealed and lost to time. This isn't about finding a monster's lair. It's about the thrilling potential to discover a place so awe-inspiring to the ancient people who saw it that its memory could only be preserved as a story of a supernatural maze. The true treasure hidden within this myth may not be gold or bones, but a deeper understanding of how a magnificent, real civilization was transformed into one of humanity's most enduring legends. To truly appreciate the legend, we must look past the monster and focus on the mind that built its prison. In the myths, Daedalus is credited with nothing less than revolutionizing the very act of creation. He was said to have invented the axe, the saw, and the level tools that transformed woodworking and construction from a crude craft into a precise science. With these instruments, humanity could shape the world with an accuracy previously unimaginable, fitting stones together seamlessly and raising structures that defied the elements. This portrayal of Daedalus as the ultimate engineer makes the concept of the labyrinth feel less like pure fantasy and more like a mythological celebration of human ingenuity pushed to its absolute limit. The described design of the maze was a masterpiece of psychological and architectural deception. It wasn't merely a jumble of walls. Ancient sources suggest it was a multi-leveled chaos of intentionally repeating patterns, deceptive symmetries, and corridors that curved just enough to disorient the inner ear and destroy any sense of direction. The goal was to create a space that felt actively hostile to human navigation, where every choice felt wrong and the very architecture seemed to shift around the visitor. This wasn't just a building, it was a machine designed to produce a specific state of mind, utter hopelessness. For such a concept to even exist in the imagination of ancient storytellers, there must have been a real-world inspiration of awe-inspiring complexity. That inspiration almost certainly came from the very real and advanced engineering of the Minoan civilization. When we examine the ruins of Knossos, we don't see primitive rubble. We see the bones of a society that was architecturally millennia ahead of its time. The palace was a multi-storied complex with grand staircases reinforced with sturdy descending columns made of entire tree trunks turned upside down. They employed clever light wells to channel sunlight deep into the interior rooms and sophisticated ventilation systems to ensure air circulation throughout the sprawling building. Perhaps most astonishingly, the Minoans had a fully developed plumbing system with terracotta pipes that carried fresh water into the palace and waste out, complete with removable sections for maintenance. For the later Mycenaean Greeks, whose own palaces were far more simplistic and fortress-like, encountering the remains of this sophisticated complex would have been a breathtaking experience. The sheer scale, the clever use of space, the hidden networks of pipes bringing water seemingly from nowhere, it would have felt less like a ruined building and more like a relic from an age of gods and heroes. The logical explanation that this was the work of an advanced, peaceful civilization was lost to time. Instead, the memory of this impossible place, with its countless rooms and confusing layout, was preserved in the only way that made sense to them, as the Labyrinth, a supernatural maze built by a superhuman genius for a terrifying supernatural purpose. The myth, therefore, becomes a tribute to a real technological marvel, a way for a less sophisticated culture to explain something so advanced it bordered on magic. What's truly compelling about these ancient stories is how they often place powerful, complex women at their very center, and the legend of the Labyrinth is no exception. If we look past the hero and the monster, we find that the actions of several key female characters are the very engine that drives the entire plot, revealing a rich tapestry of human emotion and ancient social dynamics. Princess Ariadne stands as a testament to intelligence and agency. Far from being a passive princess waiting for rescue, she is the one who actively engineers the hero's success. She recognizes Theseus's potential, approaches him with a plan, and provides the singular tool that makes his victory possible, the clue of thread. Her actions are not born of a simple, fleeting crush, but rather from a calculated decision to change her own destiny. She uses her unique position and knowledge of the palace, possibly even her connection to Daedalus, to outsmart her own father and the terrifying system he upholds. In doing so, she gives the world one of its most enduring symbols for finding a way through complexity. Our modern word, clue, descends directly from that ancient Greek word for her ball of thread, a perfect linguistic artifact reminding us that the key to solving a puzzle often lies in having the right guidance. Yet the portrayal of Ariadne is a fascinating study in how myths evolve. In later Roman tellings, particularly by poets like Ovid, her character is often diminished, reframed more as a love-struck maiden betrayed by a fickle hero. This shift says more about the changing views of women in those later societies than it does about the original myth, demonstrating how these stories are constantly reshaped to reflect the values of the teller. Then we have Queen Pasiphae, a figure of profound and tragic complexity. She is often unfairly reduced to a mere monster maker, but her story is one of victimhood and divine punishment. Her unnatural desire for the bull was not a choice. It was a curse inflicted by Poseidon to punish her husband's arrogance. She is a pawn in a divine conflict, subjected to a shame and horror that was not of her making. Her character forces us to ask who the real monsters are in this tale, the unnatural offspring, or the gods and men whose actions create such tragic circumstances. Completing this triad of influential women is Phaedra, Ariadne's younger sister, who later becomes Theseus's wife after he abandons Ariadne. Her story introduces a further layer of betrayal and tragic desire, as she subsequently falls desperately in love with Theseus's son, Hippolytus, a doomed passion that leads to her suicide and the utter destruction of their family. Through these three women, Ariadne the clever savior, Pasiphae the cursed victim, and Phaedra the tragic lover, the legend explores a breathtakingly wide spectrum of female experience: intellect, desire, betrayal, powerlessness, and terrible heartbreak. They are not simple archetypes, they are deeply human, and their actions and sufferings provide the crucial emotional weight that elevates this myth from a simple adventure story into a timeless exploration of the forces that shape and sometimes break our lives. To fully grasp the significance of the labyrinth, we must venture beyond its stone walls and into the spiritual world of the people who may have built it. For the Minoans, religion was not a separate part of life. It was woven into the fabric of their daily existence, and the bull was one of its most powerful sacred symbols. This was not simple animal worship, but a profound veneration for the bull's immense strength, vitality, and life-giving power, which were essential to their agricultural society. The famous bull-leaping frescoes at Knossos are not just dynamic art. They are likely snapshots of a deeply religious ceremony, a ritualistic dance with death that required incredible faith and skill. In this context, the act of vaulting over the charging bull could have been a way to harness its sacred energy, a test of courage to honor the gods and perhaps ensure the community's continued prosperity. This central role of the bull offers a radical reinterpretation of the Minotaur itself. Rather than a monstrous abomination, the creature, a hybrid of man and bull, could be a mythological representation of a high priest or a shaman during a sacred rite. Imagine a ritual performer wearing an elaborate, lifelike bull mask and ceremonial hide, embodying the spirit of the deity to channel its power. To an outsider, perhaps an early Mycenaean Greek witnessing such a ceremony in the dim, flickering torchlight of the palace's confusing corridors, this figure would have been terrifying and awe-inspiring. The memory of this half-man, half-bull apparition moving through the bewildering complex could have easily fossilized over centuries into the legend of a flesh-eating beast trapped in a maze. The labyrinth itself might not have been designed for confinement, but for contemplation and ceremony. Some compelling theories suggest that the winding path of the Knossos complex was a designated ritual dance path known in ancient Greek as a choros. Participants in religious festivals might have processed along these routes in a specific, meandering pattern, their movement itself a form of devotion mimicking the twisting path of the heavens or the journey of the soul. This transforms the labyrinth from a prison into a sacred pilgrimage route, its complexity meant to spiritually disorient the participant before they reached an enlightened state at the center. The most haunting and controversial evidence comes from archaeology. Excavations on Crete have uncovered human remains that point to practices far darker than vibrant frescoes and ceremonial processions. At sites like the North House at Knossos and the sanctuary at Anemesplia, archaeologists found skeletons under circumstances that suggest ritual killing. One particularly grim discovery was the body of a young man, lying on a platform with a bronze dagger placed atop him, his remains suggesting he likely died from a severe bleed. While these findings are debated and do not point to widespread sacrifice, they hint that the Minoans might have, under extreme duress such as earthquakes or famine, engaged in ritualistic practices that involved human life. This provides a chilling historical echo to the myth's most gruesome element. The Athenian tribute of 7 youths and 7 maidens could be a folk memory, distorted and exaggerated over generations, of a real but rare practice where communities offered individuals to appease the gods during a crisis, a terrifying reality that the conquering Mycenaeans would have seized upon and magnified to portray the Minoans as monstrous and justify their own dominance. Yet even the most brilliant and advanced civilizations are not immune to the raw power of the natural world. The Minoan Golden Age, for all its artistry and maritime dominance, appears to have met a sudden and devastating end, and the key to this mystery lies not on Crete itself, but on the island of Thera, 70 miles to the north. Around the year 1600 before the Common Era, the volcano at the heart of Thera, modern-day Santorini, experienced one of the most catastrophic eruptions in human history. This was not a simple volcanic event, it was a cataclysm that reshaped the Aegean world. The explosion is estimated to have been 4 times more powerful than the famous eruption of Krakatoa, sending colossal amounts of volcanic ash and pumice high into the atmosphere and generating towering tsunamis that would have radiated out across the sea with unimaginable force. The effects on Crete would have been apocalyptic. Within hours of the eruption, those living on the northern coast would have witnessed a horrifying sight, the sea pulling back dramatically from the shore, only to return as a wall of water tens of meters high. These tsunamis would have smashed into the island's ports and coastal settlements, obliterating the mighty Minoan fleet, the very source of their economic and military power, and drowning fertile farmland in salt water. This was followed by a relentless rain of volcanic ash, blanketing the island, smothering crops, contaminating water supplies, and making the air itself toxic to breathe. The sophisticated society that depended on trade and agriculture was brought to its knees almost overnight by a disaster of biblical proportions. In the wake of this devastation, the Minoans were left critically vulnerable. Their population was decimated, their economy shattered, and their once unassailable island kingdom was left open to invasion. It is in this power vacuum that we see the rise of their mainland rivals, the Mycenaean Greeks. This more militaristic, warrior-based culture from the Peloponnese had long been influenced by Minoan art and culture, but they now saw an opportunity for conquest. Over the following decades, they likely moved in, first as traders or allies, but eventually as conquerors, taking control of the weakened island and its remaining infrastructure. This historical trauma offers a profound new lens through which to view the myth of the labyrinth. The story itself can be reinterpreted as a powerful allegory for this real-world catastrophe, encoded in the language of monsters and heroes. The collapsing, bewildering palace, so easy to get lost in, could be a memory of the earthquake-shattered ruins of Knossos in the aftermath of the tsunamis. The terrifying Minotaur at its center might symbolize the primal, consuming fear and chaos of the natural disaster itself, an unstoppable, ravenous force that could not be reasoned with. And the Athenian hero Theseus, who sails from across the sea to confront the beast and end the old order, could represent the Mycenaean Greeks themselves, the outsiders who arrived in the aftermath and ultimately brought Minoan dominance to a close. The myth, in this light, becomes more than a simple tale. It is a poignant and haunting story of a brilliant civilization brought low by forces far beyond its control, its magnificent achievements remembered by later generations as a beautiful, terrifying, and ultimately doomed maze. But victory in the Labyrinth did not grant Theseus a simple or clean return to heroism. His journey home was a series of catastrophic missteps that stained his triumph with profound personal tragedy. After the adrenaline of his battle faded, he swiftly departed Crete with the rescued Athenian youths and a grateful Ariadne by his side. Their first stop was the island of Knossos, a place of rest that would become the setting for one of mythology's most perplexing betrayals. For reasons that ancient poets have debated for millennia, Theseus abandoned the sleeping princess on the deserted shore, sailing away without her as dawn broke. Some versions suggest the god Dionysus appeared to Theseus in a dream, demanding Ariadne for himself, while others imply the hero simply fell out of love or was overcome by fear of bringing a Cretan princess, the daughter of his enemy, home to Athens. This act reveals the deep flaw in his character, a capacity for callousness that tempers his legendary bravery. Abandoned and heartbroken, Ariadne's story, however, was not over. The wine god Dionysus did indeed find her, and in many tellings he not only comforted her but made her his immortal wife, elevating her to divinity and placing a jeweled crown among the stars as the constellation Corona Borealis. This twist offers a bittersweet counterpoint, suggesting that while mortal heroes may be fickle, the gods themselves could recognize and reward her worth, transforming her personal tragedy into a celestial celebration. Yet Theseus's failures were not yet complete. So consumed by grief over abandoning Ariadne, or perhaps simply lost in the euphoria of his victory, he committed the single most devastating oversight of his journey. He forgot the solemn promise he had made to his father, King Aegeus. Before departing, the aged king had made his son swear that if he succeeded, he would replace the ship's black sail of mourning with a white one, providing a clear signal of his safe return. As the ship approached the Athenian coast, the lookout on the Acropolis saw the vessel still sporting its somber black sail. King Aegeus, watching for his son, saw the same grim signal and, gripped by utter despair and the certainty that his heir was dead, threw himself from the cliffs into the sea below. In that moment of forgetfulness, a father's life was lost, and the sea itself gained a new and enduring name, the Aegean. This heartbreaking conclusion forces us to question the very nature of the hero archetype. Theseus had achieved the impossible. He had slain the monster and freed his people from a gruesome tyranny. Yet his personal failings, his forgetfulness, and his betrayal resulted in irrevocable harm to those who loved and aided him most. His story becomes a powerful meditation on the cost of victory and the idea that a hero's legacy is not defined solely by their great deeds in battle, but by their character, their memory, and their compassion in the moments that follow. The waves of the Aegean Sea thus forever whisper a dual tale, one of a hero's glorious quest and another of a grieving father, a permanent reminder that even the greatest triumphs can be shadowed by profound and avoidable loss. Yet the story of the Labyrinth is far from a closed book, as modern archaeology continues to breathe new life into this ancient mystery, employing tools that would seem like magic to Sir Arthur Evans. Recent excavations at Knossos have moved beyond shovels and brushes, utilizing technologies like ground-penetrating radar to peer beneath the soil without disturbing a single stone. These scans have revealed a network of previously unknown chambers and passageways snaking underground, suggesting the palace complex was even more vast and intricate than anyone had previously imagined. It's as if the earth itself is slowly revealing hidden wings of the labyrinth, hinting that the full scale of Minoan architectural ambition is still coming to light, offering tantalizing new spaces where history and legend could intertwine. Perhaps the most tantalizing clues lie not in architecture but in language. The Minoans left behind two main scripts, Linear A and Linear B. Linear B, which was deciphered in the 1950s, turned out to be an early form of Greek used by the Mycenaean administrators who later occupied Knossos. These clay tablets are largely administrative records detailing inventories of goods, livestock, and offerings, giving us a dry but invaluable peek into the palace's economy. But the earlier script, Linear A, used by the Minoans themselves, remains a profound enigma. Despite numerous attempts, no one has yet cracked its code. These silent symbols etched onto clay tablets are a locked door to the Minoan mind, potentially holding their religious beliefs, their stories, and perhaps even direct references to the rituals or figures that inspired the Minotaur myth. Every undeciphered tablet is a potential Rosetta Stone waiting to be found, a silent witness that could one day speak and redefine our understanding of this civilization. Meanwhile, in laboratories, genetic analysis is adding a deeply human dimension to the puzzle. By studying ancient DNA extracted from bones found in Minoan burial sites, scientists are tracing the origins and movements of these people. The evidence suggests they were not invaders from the east, but a population deeply rooted in the Aegean since the earliest days of farming, with complex genetic ties to both Anatolia and the Greek mainland. This helps paint a picture of a sophisticated indigenous culture rather than a foreign implant. Furthermore, analysis of skeletal remains can sometimes reveal clues about diet, health, and even cause of death, providing hard scientific data to test theories about practices like ritual sacrifice. A bone can tell a story that a myth can only hint at. Each of these discoveries, from a radar anomaly to a genetic marker, acts as another piece in a colossal, 4,000-year-old jigsaw puzzle. With every new fragment, the line between the legendary labyrinth and the historical palace of Knossos becomes increasingly blurred. We are not simply proving the myth true or false. We are slowly uncovering the complex reality that was so extraordinary, so awe-inspiring, that it could only be preserved for millennia as a story of heroes, monsters, and an inescapable maze. A quest continues, driven by the conviction that the truth hidden in the soil of Crete is every bit as compelling as the legend it inspired. It's remarkable how deeply this ancient story has woven itself into the very fabric of our language, transforming specific names from the myth into universal concepts we use every day. The word labyrinth itself has traveled far from its potential roots in the House of the Double Axe. Today, it describes any incredibly intricate and confusing maze, whether it's a physical structure like a garden hedge puzzle or a metaphorical one like the bewildering corridors of bureaucracy or a difficult personal dilemma. We don't just walk through labyrinths, we navigate the labyrinth of the legal system or find ourselves lost in the labyrinth of our own thoughts. Similarly, the Minotaur has evolved from a specific mythological beast into a powerful symbol for any seemingly insurmountable challenge or a monstrous hybrid. In modern genetics, you might hear the term used metaphorically to describe a complex chimera, a creature with mixed DNA. In a business meeting, a project with too many conflicting, unsolvable problems might be called a Minotaur. The name conjures that same sense of a fearsome, central obstacle that must be confronted, no matter how daunting the path to reach it may be. Perhaps the most beautiful and enduring linguistic gift from this story is the concept of Ariadne's thread. This is no longer just a clever ball of string. It represents any guiding principle, piece of knowledge, or strand of logic that helps us find our way through overwhelming complexity. A teacher providing a clear framework for a difficult subject gives their students an Ariadne's thread, A sharp piece of evidence that cracks a cold case wide open acts as a detective's thread. In the field of computer science, algorithms designed to solve complex pathfinding problems draw direct inspiration from this very idea, using logical threads to navigate digital mazes. And this linguistic influence touches us in the most ordinary of ways. Our common word, clue, is actually a direct descendant of Ariadne's clue. In Middle English, clue literally meant a ball of thread or yarn. Over centuries, the meaning shifted from the physical object itself to the idea of anything that provides guidance or helps you unravel a mystery, much like Theseus used the thread to unravel the puzzle of the maze. So, every time we say we're looking for a clue in a game or an investigation, we are unconsciously paying homage to a princess's ingenious idea from 3,000 years ago. These terms show us that myths are not just entertaining stories, they are foundational to our thought processes, providing the archetypes and metaphors that allow us to articulate and navigate the complexities of our own world. What's truly fascinating is how the story of the Labyrinth and the Minotaur is not a singular, isolated myth. When we look at storytelling traditions from all across the globe, we find remarkably similar narratives featuring impossible mazes and terrifying creatures, suggesting these are universal symbols deeply embedded in the human psyche. Consider the ancient Indian epic, the Mahabharata. There is a gripping episode where the royal Pandava brothers and their mother are targeted by their jealous cousins, who build a palace entirely out of flammable materials like wax and lac. They are invited to a grand ceremony there, but the real plan is to set the palace ablaze and kill them all. The Pandavas, however, discover the trap and must find a way to navigate the deceptive death trap palace and escape through a secret underground tunnel, a literal labyrinth of darkness, just before the entire structure is consumed by fire. The parallels are striking, a beautiful but deceptive structure built with malicious intent, a heroic struggle for survival within a confusing and deadly environment, and a clever, cunning escape. Moving to the other side of the world, the Navajo people of North America have the epic tale of the hero twins, born for water and monster slayer. In their adventures, they must descend into a terrifying and complex series of underground worlds to confront and defeat a series of monstrous deities that are plaguing the people. These subterranean realms are described as labyrinthine, filled with winding passages, dead ends, and terrifying guardians. The journey is not just a physical one but a spiritual trial, where the twins must use their wits, courage, and help from spiritual guides to navigate the darkness and ultimately restore balance to the world. Again, the core elements resonate: the underground maze, the monstrous beings at its heart, and the hero's perilous quest to conquer them. These are not mere coincidences. They point to the idea of the labyrinth and the monster as powerful archetypes, fundamental patterns that appear in the stories of cultures that had no possible contact with each other. The maze represents the ultimate challenge, the confusing and difficult path of life itself, with all its twists, turns, and moments where we feel utterly lost. It symbolizes any overwhelming problem, a complex moral dilemma, or a period of profound uncertainty. The monster at the center is the embodiment of our deepest fears, the primal chaos that threatens to consume us, whether it's a personal failure, a societal ill, or the unknown. The hero's journey into the maze, then, is a metaphor we all understand. It is the courage to face that which terrifies us, to venture into the darkness of the unknown, be it grief, a new challenge, or a great personal risk, with the faith that we can find our way through. These ancient stories, from the shores of Crete to the deserts of the American Southwest, are a profound reminder that while our cultures and environments differ drastically, the fundamental human experience remains the same. Our ancestors everywhere looked into the darkness, felt fear, and told stories of heroes who walked into that darkness and emerged victorious, giving all of us a timeless blueprint for navigating the most bewildering labyrinths of our own lives. The very stones of Minoan Crete whisper a story that scholars are still struggling to fully decipher, And at the heart of this mystery lies one of archaeology's most heated debates. Did this seemingly peaceful and artistic civilization engage in human sacrifice? The traditional image painted by Sir Arthur Evans was of a thalassocracy that preferred vibrant frescoes to fortifications, a society that celebrated life. But later excavations have unearthed findings that paint a far more complex and unsettling picture. At the sanctuary of Anemospelia near Mount Juctas, archaeologists discovered a scene frozen in a moment of unimaginable crisis. The bones of 3 individuals were found in a building destroyed by an earthquake. One was a young man, approximately 18 years old, lying on a central platform. A bronze dagger lay near his remains, and forensic analysis suggested he died from a severe wound to his chest, his ankles possibly bound. The positions of the other 2 bodies, one clutching a ceremonial vessel, another near the entrance, suggest they were priests, perhaps performing a desperate ritual to appease an angry earth-shaking god when the very temple collapsed around them. This single find is not conclusive proof of widespread practice, but it powerfully suggests that in moments of extreme existential terror, the Minoans might have resorted to the ultimate offering. Further grisly evidence comes from the North House at Knossos itself, where the bones of 4 children were found. Analysis of these bones showed cutting marks consistent with the precise method used for butchering animal sacrifices, a detail that is chillingly difficult to explain away. While some researchers argue these marks could be from defleshing for burial or even from later cannibalism under famine conditions, the correlation with sacrificial practice is deeply compelling to others. This scant but hotly disputed evidence ensures the debate endures, forcing us to confront the possibility that the myth of Athenian tributes, while exaggerated, might have been rooted in a terrifying, rare reality. Beyond the question of sacrifice, other archaeological debates challenge Knossos' singular claim to the title of the Labyrinth. Was it truly the sole heart of Minoan power? The island is dotted with other magnificent palatial centers, each with its own unique character and potential claim to fame. The palace at Phaistos, commanding the beautiful Massara plain, is famous for its grand ceremonial staircase and the enigmatic Phaistos disc, a clay tablet stamped with mysterious, undeciphered symbols. Its layout, while complex, feels different from Knossos, perhaps more open, more deliberately arranged around its central court. Then there is Malia, a sprawling complex on the northern coast that may have been a powerful independent kingdom. Its architecture revealing a fascination with vast storage areas and intricate stonework, including the famous Knossos, a large stone disc with depressions thought to be used for ritual offerings. The existence of these rival centers suggests that Minoan Crete might have been a network of powerful city-states, much like classical Greece, with Knossos as the most powerful among equals, but not the absolute sole ruler. This broader view of Minoan civilization makes the legend even richer. The labyrinth may not represent one single palace, but the combined awe-inspiring complexity of an entire culture's architectural genius. This conversation inevitably spirals outward into one of history's greatest speculative mysteries, the lost city of Atlantis. The philosopher Plato, writing in the 4th century before the Common Era, gave us the story of a magnificent island empire, advanced and powerful, that angered the gods and was swallowed by the sea in a single day and night of cataclysmic fire and earthquake. For centuries, scholars have searched for a real-world inspiration for this tale, and Minoan Crete and the devastating eruption of Thera present an astonishingly perfect match. Think of the parallels: an advanced island-based naval power, a sophisticated culture with elaborate palaces and plumbing, suddenly shattered by a colossal volcanic explosion and the tsunamis that followed. The ash fall and economic collapse would have destroyed their world almost overnight. For the ancient Greeks, hearing fragmented tales of this magnificent civilization that simply vanished beneath the waves, the story could have evolved over generations into the parable of arrogant Atlantis that Plato eventually recorded. The legend of the labyrinth and the fall of Atlantis thus become two different cultural memories of the same profound historical trauma, the sudden, terrifying end of a golden age. These ongoing debates are not signs of scholarly failure, they are the very lifeblood of history. They show us that the past is not a static set of facts but a dynamic conversation, a continuous process of interpretation where each generation asks new questions of the old evidence, forever finding new meaning in the whispers left behind. It speaks to something fundamental within us, this ancient story woven from such contrasting threads. On one hand, there is the pure, monstrous horror of the Minotaur lurking in the shadows, a primal fear given form. On the other, the brilliant heroism of Theseus, who volunteers to walk into that darkness. We see a love that is both redeeming in Ariadne's cleverness and tragically flawed in Theseus's ultimate betrayal. It celebrates the peak of human innovation in Daedalus's genius, while also mourning the destruction that such power can unleash, both through natural disaster and human folly. These are not just elements of a good story, they are the very pillars of human experience, which is why the legend feels as fresh and relevant today as it must have felt thousands of years ago, told by firelight. More than just an exciting adventure, the labyrinth itself has become one of our most profound metaphors. It is the ultimate symbol for the confusing and often overwhelming journey of life. We all navigate our own personal mazes, the twisting corridors of difficult decisions, the dead ends of failed plans, the sudden openings into moments of joy and clarity. The choices we make at every turn define our path, leading us ever deeper into the unknown territory of our futures. And at the center of each of our mazes, we inevitably face our own Minotaurs. These are not literal beasts, but the manifestations of our deepest fears and greatest challenges. A personal loss, a professional setback, a hidden insecurity, or a moral dilemma that seems impossible to solve. Yet the myth doesn't just present the problem, it also offers a timeless solution in Ariadne's simple, brilliant thread. This is the symbol of hope and guidance that each of us seeks and sometimes finds. That thread can take many forms. It might be the unwavering support of a loved one during a crisis, a piece of wise advice from a mentor that suddenly illuminates a path forward, or the quiet voice of our own intuition that we learn to trust. It is anything that provides a lifeline back to ourselves when we feel most lost, reminding us that we have the capacity to retrace our steps, to learn from our wrong turns, and to find our way out of the darkest corners. Ultimately, the legend of the labyrinth is an open invitation. It calls on us to be explorers, not just of crumbling ancient ruins and historical mysteries, but of the vast and intricate landscape of human imagination. It asks us to admire the courage it takes to confront the unknown, whether that means sailing to a distant island or facing a personal fear. This story, passed down for millennia, endures because it is a mirror. In its polished surface, we see reflected our own struggles, our own ingenuity, and our own endless quest to find meaning and light within the beautiful, bewildering maze of existence. Thank you for joining this journey through the legend of the labyrinth. From the myths of Minos and the Minotaur to the real-world wonders of Knossos, we've seen how history and storytelling intertwine. We've walked the same stones that may have inspired Daedalus, felt the weight of Theseus's vow, and considered the profound truths hidden within Ariadne's thread. It's in this space where dusty archaeology meets timeless human imagination that the most captivating mysteries are born. Now we pass the torch to you. What echoes did this ancient tale stir in your own mind? Do you see the labyrinth as a magnificent palace, a terrifying prison, or perhaps a profound metaphor for something else entirely? Share your own theories and reflections in the comments below. We love reading your perspectives and building this community of curious explorers together. Your insights are the very thread that keeps this conversation weaving forward. If these journeys into the past bring a sense of wonder to your night, consider subscribing to the channel and tapping the bell so you won't miss our next bedtime story. There are so many more mysteries waiting for us, from lost cities to forgotten civilizations, each one a new path to wander down together. Wherever you are in the world as you drift off to sleep, may your dreams be filled with courageous heroes, clever solutions, and the quiet, persistent hope that every labyrinth, no matter how complex, holds a path through to the other side. Sweet dreams.